Hello, Dennis here with doityourselfdennis.com, and in this video I want to show you how to frame up a roof. There are three main pieces of a roof. You've got your rafters, your ceiling joists, and your ridge beam. Your rafters are the ones that go like this, and then your ridge beam is what's between the two that hold it together. And the first thing we're going to need to make for our roof is the support for the ridge beam. You're going to have something up there to support it while you put the rafters on. So what I've done is I've made me a support. What I've done is I've cut a notch in a 1x6. So what I did is I got the 1x6 and I made me a center mark, and then I centered my notch on that center mark, and then that will accept my 2x6. So it'll slide right down the side there, and that'll hold my ridge beam until I get my framing put on, my rafters. So I made it the same thickness. I'm using a 2x6 ridge beam. So this is 5.5 inches long. So it sits on top. And the next thing you're going to determine is what kind of pitch you're going to have. So on this shed we're going to do a 5/12 pitch. And what a 5/12 pitch means, for every 5 inches your rafter goes out. So this is your rafter, say. For every 5 inches it goes out, it drops. Or for every 12 inches it goes out, it drops 5 inches. So, like I said, we're going to make a 5/12 pitch. So you're going to measure the width of your building. And on this building, it's 10 feet. So our center mark was at 5 feet. So for every 5 feet, or for that 5 feet, we're going to times that by 5 inches for our 5/12 pitch. So it's 25 inches. So then on top of that, you need to take into consideration the width of the rafter itself, because your rafter sits on top of your wall, so it's actually higher than the wall. And I'll show you more once we get it put up there. So you've got to take all that into consideration. So what you're going to do is measure. I've got a 2x6 that I've cut a 5/12 pitch on, and we're going to get that on there, and it measures just about 6 inches. So just picture that your ridge beam is sitting against there like that. And then you've also got to consider that if this plane here was going up to the center, you've got that little bit of distance between the two. From here to here, it's probably about 3/8 of an inch. So to determine that, you can take a piece of 1x, and you can do this with any pitch. You can take a piece of 1x and you can set it on there, and then draw you a line. Take your square, draw you a line on there. Put your board on there, and then go like that. Well, how did I do that before? And then draw your line, and then you can hold this against there, and draw you another line to that point. And then that's going to give you the distance between the two, from here to here. And it's about 3/8 of an inch. So we're going to add that 3/8 of an inch onto it too. Then there's one more factor in it. You've got what's called your bird's mouth, because your rafter doesn't sit. Your rafter is not going to sit straight on top of the roof. You're going to cut what's called a bird's mouth, which a bird's mouth is basically like this. You're going to cut a notch out, and then this is actually where it's going to sit on there. Can you see that okay? Okay. So if we're going to make this, I'm going to make this 1 inch wide. Okay? So we had the distance between here and here is about 5 and 15/16, just about 6 inches. And then you had that 3/8 extra, so that's just say 6 3/8 of an inch. Then you're going to subtract that inch that you're going to make your bird's mouth. So now we're at 5 3/8 of an inch. So that 25 inches that you got before, you're going to add that 5 3/8 to it. So now you've got 30 3/8. So that's where you're going to place your board at. All right, so now what we want to do is put a center mark on this. It's 5 1/2 inches, so half of 5 1/2 would be 2 3/4. You might measure it both ways just to make sure it's 2 3/4. And so that's going to be your center mark. And now let's take this over and put it up on the wall. Okay, so what we did was we got the center of the wall. You know, you're going to measure from end to end, the width, and I've already made my center mark up here. So now we're going to take our board and center it on there. Oops, upside down. So let me get a nail started. And we're going to line our line up with our center line. All right, so that looks pretty good. And then you're going to want to plumb this up. So then you plumb your you might want to look, see how you are. It all looks good. Go ahead and finish setting the nails. And then we're going to put some nails in down lower just to give a little bit more support. Okay, you can see on the, can you scan back to the back wall? Okay, on the back wall we put a brace inside the wall to give us something to nail to. So now we're ready to put our ridge beam up. So let me get set up for that and we'll put it up. Okay, so what you need to do is get the length of your building. So let me get my wife here to help me real quick, and we're going to measure the length of the building. Okay, we've got 164 inches. Let me get a board out and we'll get this set up. Okay, to set up your ridge beam, there's a couple of things that you're going to have to think about before you set it up. One of the critical things is, do you want an overhang on the gable end? The gable end would be this end. So that's called your gable. And if you're going to have an overhang at all on it, and how much of an overhang if you do have one. So I want 6 inches overhang at the ridge. That's called the ridge beam. So, and then you're also going to want to know what your overhang is on your wall end. So you need to decide on how much overhang you want there. So I want 6 inches, and there's going to be a 1/2 inch plywood on there, so that's going to be 6.5 inches. So you're going to start out by making a mark at 6.5 inches. So we've made that mark, and then our measurement of the length of the wall was 164. So 164 plus the 6.5 is going to be 170.5. So we're going to make our next mark at 170.5. You still with me? Okay, so now we've got 170.5, and then for the overhang at the other end, you're going to add the 6.5 again. So you're going to have 177. So then you're going to make another mark at 177. And you're going to get your square out and mark you a line. Something else I'll point out is when you check your ridge beam, when you get the board, you're going to want it to be fairly straight, and you're going to want to check to see if it has a crown on it. The crown is, if you were looking at a board like this, holding it, the crown is it pointing up. You know, almost all boards, some of them are pretty straight, but a lot of them have a little bit of a curve to them. So you want your crown to point up, or your curve to point up. The reason that is as gravity pulls on it, it pulls it down. So that's just the way it does. And you can look at it, you know, just look down the board and you can see the curve in it. And I generally take and mark an arrow pointing up. So, all right, so we've determined where the start of our wall is. So now we're going to measure that get our rafter spacing. And on this shed, we're going to go every 2 feet. You generally have 16 inch on center, 24 inch on center. Those are about the two most common that you're going to use. But for this shed, we're just going to use 2 foot on center. So I'm going to get my wife to come over here and hold my tape measure, and we're going to make our marks. And she's just going to hold my tape on the line we made, and then we're going to do 24 inch on center. And when you get the on center, what you get is you want to be your rafters are 1.5 inches. So excuse me. So you want half of that, so 3/4 of an inch. So you're going to mark your mark 3/4 of an inch, either bigger than the 24 or smaller than the 24. So we're at 23 1/4. And most tape measures have, I don't know if you can see this or not, but they'll have a red, and that's 16 inch on center on your red. And then, you know, 24 foot or 2 foot centers will be just every 2 feet. Something else I like to do is when I make my mark, I'll put an X next to it. So that means I'm going to cover that X up with my rafter. So then we're just going to mark our line, and we'll just go on down through there and mark the rest of them. All right, now that we've got all these marked down through here, now we're going to turn it over or standing up on its edge, and we're going to make a mark on the top. And the reason we're doing that is we want to transfer the first mark we made over to the other side, because you're going to have a rafter on each side. So go ahead and you're going to do that all the way down to the other end, just like we did the other lines. So let me finish doing that, and then I'll be back. Before we put our ridge beam up, we need to cut that extra off that we had left over, that we got left over. So let's go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so now we're ready to set the ridge beam. So let me get it set up there and we'll get it set. A couple things I failed to tell you before was, I told you I made my center mark up here. Well, then I took this 1x6 and I made a center mark on it. So that's what I lined up here. I didn't tell you that before. But that's what I did. I drew my line and I made a center mark. And to plumb it, you plumb it with, with a level. Make sure it's plumb. And we're all good there. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. The way we're doing it is, we're going to have a piece of the ridge beam sticking out. Well, you don't necessarily have to have the ridge beam sticking out. You can have it go flush, and if you're going to have an overhang, you can make a separate fly rafters, which we'll have to make fly rafters anyways, but this is a 2x6, and say you wanted a 2x4 fly rafter, then, or the overhang made out of 2x4 instead of 2x6, you could make one out of 2x4 and attach it to the main rafter. Or you can also go ahead and do it this way, but you would have to cut your ridge beam down in order to accommodate a 2x4. Sometimes if your rafters are, say, a 2x8 or a 2x10, and you're using a 2x8 or a 2x10 ridge beam, well, then you're not going to want a 2x8 or 2x10 fascia. So you would want to be able to cut that down to accommodate whatever you are going to use. So let me go ahead and get this set up there, and we'll get started on it. You want to come help me? My wife's going to help me at the other end. And you're not going to line this up with the line that you made. That's going to go past it a little bit. Good there? And so it's just going to slide down, and that's going to support your ridge beam. So let me get, well, the next thing you're going to want to do is decide on how long your rafter is going to be. And before I went and got my materials, I drew it out on a piece of graph paper and determined about how long it needed to be. It's going to be about 7 feet with a foot overhang. So what you can do is just kind of get a measurement from the wall, and we're about a little better than 5 feet, about 62 inches. So if I cut my rafter at 7 foot, then we should be okay, and we'll cut the tail off later. So let me go ahead and get my rafter cut, and then I'll show you how we're going to determine how we actually need to make the rafter itself. All right, we've got our board cut in half, and now what we need to do next is cut an angle on it at whatever pitch, the 5/12 pitch. So on a speed square, you've got 2 different sets of numbers. Well, actually 3. You've got angles, which is on the bottom, and then you've got the next one, which is called your common pitch, and then you've got your hip and valley pitch, those are for determining how to cut a hip or a valley rafter. So we're going to go with the common, because it's just a common rafter. So we're going to set that on 5, and we're going to go ahead and cut our, make a line, and we're going to cut it off. Okay, so then we're going to go over the shed, and this generally takes 2 people to do. So let me get over there, or we'll get set up over there, and I'll show you what we're going to do. Okay, so next, something I didn't tell you before was, as far as setting this up here, it's not absolutely critical, but you're going to want it to be, the thickness of the wall is 3.5 inches. So you're going to want to kind of set this at about 3.5 inches from your support that you made earlier. But the next thing we're going to do is determine where to cut our bird's mouth at. And the way we're going to do that is, if the bird's mouth is 1 inch deep, then we're going to want to go from the peak of this to 1 inch. So we're going to measure down 1 inch. And make a mark. We'll take our square and draw us a line across there. And I'm going to get my wife to help me. She's going to mark it at the other end. And what we're going to do is we're going to line that line up with the top of our top of our ridge beam. The reason we're doing that is because if the bird's mouth is going to drop at that end, that inch, then we need to be 1 inch high down here. So I've got it set. My line's lined up with the top of the ridge beam. My wife's going to mark where to cut the bird's mouth out at the edge of the wall. So let me get that cut, or I'll show you how we cut that. All right, so to cut out our bird's mouth, what we're going to do is that mark that my wife made earlier, we're going to get the 5/12 pitch on it, and we're going to put our square on that mark and line up the 5/12 pitch. And then we're going to come in 1 inch. Then we're going to take our square and make a longer line. Then we're going to take our square and line it up with the line we made and line it up with the 1 inch mark. Can you see that okay from there? Yeah. So there's our bird's mouth. We probably could have gone maybe 1 1/4 inches or even 1.5 inches, giving us a little bit more, but this will be okay. So now we're going to cut it out. Okay, so now we've got our bird's mouth. So then our ridge, or our rafter, will sit up there just like that. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set it up there and make sure all the angles are good, and we'll make a pattern out of this, and then we'll just cut the rest of our rafters. So let me check to make sure it's nice and square, and then we'll cut our patterns out, or cut our rest of it. Okay, so when you're checking to make sure it's what you want, you're going to just line it up just like it would be sitting there, and you want to check to make sure you're together good here up against your ridge beam, line it up at the top. It all looks pretty good. So this will be our pattern. So we'll just cut the rest of them after this, and then we'll cut the other end off for our determine our overhang. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so let me show you how to set up a pattern real quick. So we've determined this is good. So we're going to get our next rafter. We're going to check the crown on it. Going up, and then we're going to just take the one we cut already and line it up on it so that the crown's the same way. And then just, I don't know if you can see me. Let me turn it around. So then you just make your marks. Same down here. And then you just cut those two pieces out. And just cut the rest of them. So just do one side at a time, because there's liable to be a little variance between one side and the other. And you'll want to take that in consideration. So now theoretically it should be centered just perfect, but it just doesn't always work that way. So anyways, let me go ahead and get all these cut, and then I'll show you how to set them. Alright, now we're ready to start setting our rafters. Something you might want to do is go ahead and get a nail started on this side. Then you're just going to line it up like you had it before. Line the top up. Put your your nail in there, and we'll go down the other end. We'll go ahead and get our nail started in it. Something I'll tell you, when you're toenailing something like this, if you got a line, you're going to want to be a little past the line. As in this, I'm going to be just a little bit past the wall framing, because as you knock it in, it's going to push it back. So you're just going to hold it there. We'll go ahead and put another nail in it. Okay, so then we're going to go back up there, and we'll end up putting 2 more nails into that. I guess you could have gone ahead and put all 3 nails in while you were down here, but make sure we're still lined up good with our line. And we'll put 1 more nail in it. And then you're going to do the same thing the rest of the way down. You're going to line it up on your line on your top plate. We're just going to do it the rest of the way down, and then we'll start the other side. Okay, something I didn't do earlier was mark my plates. Actually, I do have them marked, but so I didn't have them marked either. So you're just going to do the same thing that you did on your rafter or on your ridge beam. that one. Don't want that one. And then you're just going to continue to do that the rest of the way down. Okay, we've got all our rafters set on the one side, so now we're ready to check the other side or this side. But something I want to point out first real quick. See how the ridge pole and then your rafter is hanging just a little below that. In some places that's not code. So if we wanted it to be code, we would have had to use the 2x8 in order to for that not to hang below. But this is just a shed, so it'll be fine. So what we're going to do is we need to set, this is our pattern rafter that we cut earlier. And we're going to go ahead and set it up there just like it would go. Line it up. And as we can tell, we're a little bit long. We're about 3/8 of an inch long. And I checked it on the other end, it's about the same. Just about 3/8 of an inch long. So what we're going to do, I mean, that just happens. I mean, it's not an exact science, framing isn't. So what we're going to do is cut 3/8 of an inch off that end, and that should pull that in. So let me go cut that off and we'll check it again. Okay, so I've cut 3/8 of an inch off that end. So now let's check to see how well it fits. Line this up out here. And looks like we're pretty good out there. So now we'll cut the rest of them, and then we'll put them up. Okay, we've got all our rafters cut, and we're ready to start putting them up. So we're going to put the first one up. We're going to line it up against there. Good idea to go ahead and get a nail started. Line it up on our line back there and push against the wall. And remember, we're gonna overhang just a hair, just a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch. Put another one in. Then we're going to put one in on the back side. But you're going to have to put it at a pretty good angle. Kind of between the middle of the last two. Too much of an angle. Try that again. Okay, so we're good there. Now we're going to nail the other end. I've already got a nail started, so we'll just nail that, get it ready, line it up at the top, probably go down just a hair. Then what you're going to do, once you take this down, you'll want to put another couple of more nails in the back side. You could also take a nail and put it out here. Alright, so we're good there. So then you're just going to do all the rest of them on down to the other end, and then we'll be ready to cut our tails off. Okay, you're going to want to nail this end first, okay? And then up here, what you'll see is what will happen is the rafter will be just a little bit higher than the ridge beam. And the reason that is because you've got the other side on and it's making it sag down. So what you're going to do is you just line your line up and then you just pick it up a little bit. And then put your nail in. go ahead and get your nail started. Oops. It really helps with 2 people, but my wife's running the camera, so I can't do that. So that's why it's doing that. Now it should be sitting right. And you'll just do the same thing all the way down, and you'll want to nail it from the other side, or you can toe nail it from here. You know, you can take a nail, put it in like this. Might even be better if you can hit the nail. Put your nail on this side. Just make sure it's lined up on your line. So that's about all there is to setting the rafters. Next we'll cut the tails off, and then we'll do the fly rafters. Okay, we're ready to put our studs in our gable area. But first I wanted to point something out. Where this is hanging down, our support for our ridge beam, where this is hanging down, you might want to put something underneath it. We've got a concrete block underneath it so that you don't run into it quite so easy. So what we want to do is we want to put a stud. Are you ready? We want to put a stud in these areas. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put them at 2-foot centers. So you're going to mark, hook on the end of the wall, mark it 23 1/4, 47 1/4, and then on down every 2 feet. And then you're going to take your square and make you a mark, make you a line, and put your X on the side that the stud's going to be on. And then what you want to do is with this mark that you made here, you want to get a level line. So let me do it from this one here, probably a little better. So you're going to just level up from that line and draw you a line up here. You see what you're going to end up doing is you got to notch your 2x4 out in order to accept the rafter. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to measure up, and you can go by that line, and you don't want it to stick above, so you just cut it a little bit short. So we're going to cut this one at 25 inches, and this one here would be at about 14.5 inches. So let's go down to the saw and I'll show you how we're going to cut that. Okay, so what I've got my piece cut 25 inches. So then you're going to come back up here and you're going to hold it back about 1.5 inches from the front of the wall, and you're going to line it up on your line, and then you're going to line it up on your line on your rafter. Then you're going to take your pencil and make a mark from the rafter. You're going to, like that. Then you're going to come down here and you're going to measure over 1.5 inches. I'm just using my square. You're going to measure over 1.5 inches. Draw you a line. You see how I've got this? This is the line from the that we drew up on the rafter, and then you got your 1.5 inches. Now we're just going to cut that piece out. Something I should have already done was what you need to do is you need to set your blade at 1.5 inches depth, or just a little better than 1.5 inches. So what you can do is your line that you had drawn on here, just push your blade down to where it's even with that. Just go a little bit further. And then tighten up your, you see that? That way when we cut this line, it'll only be an 1.5 inches deep. So we'll go ahead and cut it. Now it's nice to have a jigsaw, so now you can cut the rest of that out. I didn't cut quite an 1.5 inches deep. So this is what we end up with. So let me get up there. Right, so we've got our piece cut. So what you're going to do is bring it up, line it up on your line, and you're going to line it up on the line up here. Then you're going to put your nail in. Drop my nail. Make sure you're on your line good. So you're nice and flush out here, like you're supposed to be. Another nail in. You're gonna line it up down here. Toenail it. Make sure you're flush with the edge of the wall. We'll put the ring down here. Okay, so you'll go ahead and do all the rest of them, and then you'll put the plywood on the outside. So let me get the rest of them set, then we'll put the plywood on. Okay, instead of trying to balance your saw on this to set your depth, what you can do is lay it down flat and then set your depth by that. And you can just set it on the 2x, it's easier to lay it on there. And just set it just a little lower. And so that's all you do to set it. All right, we're ready to cut our tails off now. So this is going to get a 12-inch overhang. So it's going to get a 2x6 as a fascia board. So you need to take that 1.5 inches to the thickness of the 2x6 off. So it's 10.5 inches. So what you're going to do is you measure out from the wall 10.5 inches, make you a mark, and then you're going to get a little level and plumb a line up. Make you a mark. Then on the top, you're going to take your square and extend your line across the top of the rafter. Then you're going to do the same thing down at the other end, and then we'll chalk a line from here down to the other end. So let me get my wife to go down to the other end and we'll chalk a line real quick. So you just line it up on your line and then pop a line. Okay. All right, so what you're going to do now, you've got your line going across the top, and just kind of extend it down a little bit, and then just plumb your line from that. Now, theoretically, it should be a 5/12 pitch, but invariably they're usually off a little bit. So I usually, instead of using my square, I mean it's real close, but it's off just a little bit. But so to plumb it down, and then just get your saw, cut it off. that's how you cut the tails off. And we'll just continue on down, and then we'll be ready to put the fascia on and the fly rafters. All right, so we're ready to start putting our fascia on. And remember that we're going to have an overhang of 6 inches on the gable end of the building. So we had 6 inches plus a ½ inch for the plywood. So it's 6.5 inches. So we need to come in, these boards are going to be a little long, that way I can cut it off, you know, after I get the fly rafters on. So I'm going to come in 8 inches, and that'll give me a couple inches to play with. So I'm going to come in 8 inches, and that's where I'm going to start my 2 foot on center. So I'm going to get my wife to come over here and help me, and she's going to hold my tape measure. If you're doing this by yourself, you could just put a nail in there and let it to hold your tape measure. So, you there? Go ahead and do your 2 foot on center, and just go the rest of the way down, and then we'll put it up there. So. All right, we're ready to start building our fly rafters, or overhang. Some people call them fly rafters, overhang, same thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your, you're going to measure first. So let's get our measurement first. And you're going to measure from the very top of the rafter, and then up to the top of the ridge beam. And we've got 75 3/4. I've gone ahead and cut it. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your 5/12 pitch, and if you were a little off down at the bottom, you'll want to adjust for that. But 5/12 should still be okay if that's what your pitch is. So you're going to take your board and you're going to set it up in there just to make sure it fits like it's supposed to. And we're good just like that. So we're going to use this one as a pattern. So we're going to take it down. We're not going to hang it yet. Let me get another board. All right, and you're going to check your crown. Crown's pointing up. We're going to place our on and get some help. Kind of nice to have some help to line. You're going to mark your board. When you cut, marking it, you want to take the line. I know that little bit may not matter a little bit. So when you cut it, you're going to cut the line out. You're going to cut to it. So before I cut this off, I'm going to need a block between the two pieces, between the two long pieces. So we're going to go ahead and cut those. I think it's actually a little better. So what you want to do to determine what size you need it, you're going to measure out, and we've got about 5 7/8. So our pieces are going to be 2 7/8. So we need to cut those. So let me go ahead and get these cut, and then we'll put it up there. So what we're going to do next is you're going to lay pieces on top of the end and the edges, and there's not any spacing. I've cut 4 blocks. Mark my square. make a mark. I go about, oh, I don't know, 20 inches or so. And then you turn them over, and then you transfer your line onto your, where the boards are going to go, the blocks are going to go. Okay, so now you got the block. Lay them up there. And you'll flip it back over. Not a bad idea to go. Of course, if you got an air nail, that's kind of nice too, but I ran out of nails and didn't feel like going and getting any more. So then you're going to go ahead and nail the rest of them on, and then you'll turn it over and nail the other side. So let me get this all nailed together, and then we'll put it up there. Okay, we're ready to put this up, so let me get my lovely assistant. And we'll get it nailed up there. Good there. These are a little hard to nail where it's just 6 inches overhanging. Line up, drop it down to there. Line up, stay top. Position. Right. On the top. I know, not supposed to stay on top rung. There, there. These blocks that you're on are probably going to come apart a little. Okay. Now work your way back down. The lilies are nipped. Then get them seated back, and then what we're going to do is we're going to cut this off. And some people just leave it. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your square and kind of line it up, make a mark, make your mark at the top. Draw your line from there. So It's all good there. So let's get this set up. The way you're going to do this, what you're going to do is you get a little level, or a level, and you're going to level over to the building, over to the corner. And you're going to make a mark. Now I like to take because the board's going to go down this way, so I like to extend the line out. And we're going to do the same thing at the other end, and then we'll chalk a line from here to the other end. All right, so you need to find your studs, and or you could make a whole long one, but you really need to find your studs anyways, regardless. So we're going to measure over to the center of this stud. We got 80, 84 and 7/8. So then you got to add your overhang on. So you're going to come out here and measure over to the inside. So should be just about 4.5 inches. It is 4 9/16. So you're going to add that on to your other measurement, and that's how long you need to cut this board. So let me cut this board, and then we'll be right back. All right, let me get my help up here. You're going to hold the other end. Be careful, there's a window right there. A little better. So you're going to get your nail started. I mean, you can buy a board long enough to do the whole thing, but I had this board, so I just need one, so I'm just going to use them. Huh? Well, come my way if you can. Let me knock the nail in.
Close up there.
Yeah, we got a window right there. I've got it covered up. Put the window in. So you got to take that into consideration. And the stud's going to be right there. Need to go up just a hair. That's good. Too far. So you're going to do the same thing all the way down, and then we'll put the return on. All right, we've got our soffit board on, and now we're going to put a return on. We'll come across and then up. So you're going to measure how long it needs to be, about 10 7/16, and then you're going to measure straight up. Just put your tape measure against it. And measure up to the bottom of the rafter. It's about 4.5 inches. So let me get that cut and we'll put it up there. All right, we've got our piece cut. Just kind of line it up with the edge. That's all there is to it, making your return. Now it's ready for the soffit. Okay, there was bracing. Normally you would brace your walls periodically on the sides. Of course, this building's not very long, it's only 14 feet long, so we just braced it in the center. And then to get that brace out of the way, I went ahead and put one of my ceiling joists in so that just to stabilize the building until we got the rest of the ceiling joists in. This is the last part that we need to do, so What we're going to do, we're going to use 2x6s for the ceiling joist, which is plenty for the span that we've got, especially considering there's nothing hanging underneath it. But anyway, so then we're going to put the ceiling joist up against the rafters and mark the back side of it, or at the top of the rafter, so that we can cut that off, and then we'll be ready to put the ceiling joists in. You can see where I made my mark here, and that's what we're going to cut off. Okay, so I've got it cut. We're ready to put it up. Something else is you need to crown it. Make sure that the crown's going up. The reason for that is as you put weight on it, or over time, the wood will settle down. So I'm just going to put it up there. And I just cut about an inch extra off. Can you run and get me some nails, honey? And so then I'm just going to toenail it into the top plate. Okay, so I'm going to put 2 in the top plate. And the top through to the rafter. And that's all you do. You just do every one of them. What you would do up here is you'd nail a plate, a 2x onto it at the top of the top plate, and that would give you something to nail your whatever you're going to use as your ceiling. But that's all there is to framing a roof. Thanks for watching, and check out my other videos at doityourselfdennis.com. Thanks again. Alright, so this is what it's supposed to look like when it's done.